Our lives depend on plants. From the food we eat, to the clothes we wear, to the roof over our heads, we rely on plants to turn sunlight, soil, and water into every aspect of our lives. Seeds are our livelihood. With each wave of immigration to the United States, our ancestors brought over their seeds and began to tend the land. This garden heritage of the United States is rich and diverse. Our grandparents selected for plants that would produce a nice harvest even during a drought year. They selected for plants that were resistant to certain pests or for plants that grew low to the ground so they could withstand a windstorm. And of course, they selected for taste, taking great pride in growing the most flavorful tomato in the whole county. They spent years selecting the seeds from the best plants and then passing those seeds down to their children. The history stored within each tiny seed is immense, and while modern plant breeding can produce a variety of useful traits, it's no match for the decades of time and care that has gone into heirloom seed varieties. So when I heard that today up to 100,000 plant species are being threatened with extinction, I began to wonder, was anybody doing anything to protect the crops our ancestors had been growing for decades? Who was fighting for the genetic diversity of our food supply? Did anybody realize how much knowledge and history was tucked away into each little seed? My search for answers led me to Seed Savers Exchange, a nonprofit organization located in Decorah, Iowa, just 2 hours from my house. Seed Savers' goal is to preserve America's garden heritage through seed banks and seed sharing. Members participate in a network of growing and swapping their heirloom seed varieties around the nation and beyond. I had heard about Seed Savers before, but the more I learned, the more I wanted to know. I got in contact with Sarah Strati, an in-house seed historian, and within a week I was driving to Decorah to meet her for a tour of the facility and a more in-depth look at what they do. When I met Sarah in the Visitors Center, I thanked her for meeting me. She lent me a smile that said there wasn't a thing in the world she would rather do on a Saturday morning than walk me through the history of Seed Savers and their seed collection. After a brief tour of the property, Sarah walked me through the process of their work as if I were a seed. First, the seeds are tested to see how well they germinate. That is, if you planted 10 of a given seed, how many will actually grow? Once that's been determined, the seeds are stored in a cool, dry room until they dry out. When the seeds are good and dried out, they are packaged up into tiny, moisture-proof packages and stored in a cooler with all the other varieties. I asked Sarah if Seed Savers backs up their seeds anywhere else.
From each seed variety, we send a sample to the USDA Seed Bank in Fort Collins, and we send another sample to the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway, which is a bit like a doomsday preparation for seeds, but only small-scale doomsdays. We wouldn't be able to feed the population with the seeds stored in Svalbard, but in the case of small-scale disasters, the vault is a way to reclaim the varieties that may have been lost. It's a smart decision to back up our collection in case something ever happened to it, so we send some seeds for backup and the rest go in the cooler.
Standing in the seed cooler is underwhelming. Looking around, all I see are shelves, each one filled with packages. Nothing fancy or crazy. But I know better than to be underwhelmed, because each of these seeds has a story, a history, and something to offer for the future. I knew that each seed was special, but I didn't fully comprehend how special these heirloom seeds were until we left the cooler. Just outside the cooler door sat 2 file cabinets. Sarah explained that when Seed Savers first started, they had put an ad in Mother Earth News asking people to send their heirloom seed varieties. The response they got was incredible. Unfortunately, at the time, they didn't have the staff to properly document the history and origin of each seed that came in. That's Sarah's job now. She sorts through these file cabinets, pulling out the original letters that were sent with the seeds, and trying to gather as much information as she can. Some letters make it easier than others, and some are more interesting than others. Sarah shows me the database she uses to store all this information. She pulls up a recipe card for Swedish baked beans, which the letter describes as being the best baked beans around. We laugh about how 2 cups of brown sugar sure would make some tasty baked beans. I asked Sarah about the future of these seeds. Sure, the history is intriguing, but what can they offer us in the future, in the face of changing climates and food insecurity? Sarah tells me that one of Seed Saver's goals is to evaluate their seed collection in order to determine which varieties might be of use in the face of changing climates. Her face lights up when she tells me about their Member Grower Evaluation Network, or MGen for short. Starting in 2011, Seed Savers realized that they were only able to evaluate the performance of their plants here in Iowa. Recognizing that these heirloom varieties will be key to maintaining the resilience of our food supply, MGen is a program that asks members around the world to grow select varieties of crops and evaluate their performance. These evaluations provide feedback for how a given variety may be of use in an ever-changing climate. After a few hours of touring and talking, I thanked Sarah again for her time and headed back to Iowa City. The 2-hour drive gave me time to think about what I'd learned and made me hungry for more seed stories. The next story popped out at me from my pantry. Tiny but mighty popcorn, the best popcorn I've ever had, turns out to come from an heirloom seed variety, believed to have come from Native Americans that was almost lost entirely. I met up with current owner, farmer Gene Mielhow, to learn more about the story of their seeds.
Well, you know the story of the popcorn had been kept for 3 generations in Richard Kelty's family, passed down through the eldest son, and it was just eaten within their family. Well, when Richard, he was the eldest son, and he was an only child, and his wife was an only child of the Zezer family.
Okay.
But they were both farming families, so they had farms. And the year before Richard came home, he was in the military. He was a life military guy. His dad died.
Okay.
The seed never got planted. So when he came home the following year, his mother said, "Richard, would you like some of Grandpa's popcorn?" Because it went clear back to Samuel Kelty, early 1800s, great-great-great-grandpa.
Wow.
And Richard said, "Sure." Well, he heard her in the kitchen, and he went out there and he said, "Mom, how much of that corn you got left?" She had about 3-4 inches in the bottom of a gallon glass jar. And Richard said, "Wait a minute." And he saved a handful of seeds and planted 12 rows in the garden then. And then, so everything you see here from what we've done with it came from a handful of seeds and 12 rows in the garden.
Wow.
So it was saved then.
Today, Tiny But Mighty is a successful popcorn company. Their specific variety of popcorn is special because the hulls virtually disintegrate when eaten, and the kernels are more flavorful than other varieties. They now sell their products in stores across the U.S. and abroad, and all this from 12 rows in a garden. Tiny But Mighty popcorn is just one seed variety among millions. My journey to find the story of the seeds that surround me has opened my eyes to the treasures that seeds truly are. In the face of changing climates, conflict, and food insecurity, saving seeds is a small, radical act that saves the past and the future.